Building diversity in your garden. So, in this blog, we'll explore how to increase biodiversity in your garden and life, including why garden diversity is important. Diversity strengthens garden resilience. Diversity preserves our food system, and diversity in our lives helps us live better lives. Community, we'll talk about community of diversity and resilience, social permaculture, living the ethics of diversity, and practical ways to increase diversity, biodiversity in your garden. And then we'll end with some final thoughts on how you can apply all of the the things that we're talking about, and then you can choose your next step. So, why is garden diversity important? God was certainly not a minimalist when he created the universe. The sheer abundance of plant species, animals, and ecosystems is a testament to the beauty and necessity of diversity. A garden that embraces diversity reflects this natural balance, promoting resilience, sustainability, and abundance. Nature thrives on diversity, and when we imitate that principle, we create gardens that are healthier, more productive, and more resilient against pests, diseases, and climate change. So, how does garden diversity strengthen your resilience, your garden's resilience? Every plant has pests that naturally feed on it. So when you plant a single crop, so we often call this monoculture in agriculture, pests thrive because they have an unlimited food source. Without diversity, pest populations can explode, leading to a devastated harvest. So from diversity of choosing different kinds of plants also emerges highly specialized animals that create relationships with a specific type of plant. And so you may be fostering populations that would help mitigate the overabundance of the pests that would attack that crop if you interplant it, as we will find out later, if you chose to different crops rather than the same crops in one place. So, for instance, this has come up in history. Certain butterflies, like zebra swallowtails, rely exclusively on pawpaw leaves. So, if you're not familiar with the pawpaw tree, that's the largest Native American fruit tree, and it actually is more of a tropical bend to it. But zebra swallowtails and flies are their main pollinators. And monarch butterflies are known to lay eggs specifically on milkweed. So I talk about how this, a little bit more about the monarch butterfly in detail in the blog, and also some other recently surfacing data on milkweed, on monarch butterflies in particular, that they also um, like uh, to drink from boneset or other bitter. Milkweed is very bitter, bitter flowers, because they're seeking out these things called pyrrolizidine. Pyrrolizidine. I'm totally murdering it. Alkaloids, PAs. And this makes themselves bitter against predators. So predators will try to eat these monarch butterflies, and find that they're very bitter to the taste, and probably not want to eat them in the future. And so that's why butterflies are looking for these sources, and that recently we thought that it was only milkweed that it was feeding on, but it's now diversified its own palette. So by growing a variety of plants, you reduce pest infestations. You also disrupt pest life cycles, because then you get other populations that will quell the infestation, and you attract beneficial insects that control harmful pests naturally. So you don't have a mosquito problem, Jeff Lawton, like say you have a lack of dragonfly problem. Want an easy way to ensure biodiversity in your garden? Our Sage app actually helps you check family plant diversity, plant family diversity, and balance companion planting, and create a more resilient permaculture garden. So there is a point here where you can check to see if your guild has different families in it, or if your raised garden bed has different families in it. And in a raised bed, I believe like the recommended minimum, not minimum, but maybe maximum number of varieties is 8 different families. um, I don't know if there's really a minimum or maximum, quite frankly, but I think in terms of aesthetic, there probably is a maximum number of, of different things that you want to plant. And yet, when you try to balance that, there's always this notion that a permaculture garden, because it's so diverse, and polyculture is an ugly garden because there's too much of different things. Um, and so designers will say, let's cap that off at 8 so you don't have too much like wildness in your garden. And yet it also depends on how that design is placed and the repetition of certain plant families. So we'll go into design on some other blog. But diversity also preserves our food system. So biodiversity also. So maybe I should just qualify these to be biodiversity. um, did you know that 94% of sea diversity has disappeared? This is based on what was presented in the movie Seed, The Untold Story. Wonderful movie from before the pandemic, very, very relevant until now. So please find it and give it a watch. There are 7,500 varieties of apples around the world, about 2,500 of which are grown in the United States. And you can find only 100, probably less, but this says 100 of these apples in commercial markets today. And I bet if you walk into your typical grocery store, you would find perhaps a Fuji, Red Delicious, Green Delicious, Macintosh, Pink Lady, those kinds of things. How many different apple varieties can you name out of those 7,500? And the same pattern holds true for lettuce, cabbage, and other staple crops. So whereas originally we had 497 varieties of lettuce 80 years ago, we now only have 36. Or that 544 different cabbages are now down to 28. These are startling numbers with repercussions on the food system that we are experiencing today. And the thing is, some of these have already been bred to be naturally because of how they've evolved through the years. They've become naturally resistant to certain bugs. They taste differently. And so you lose that little part of nature when we don't have that available to us anymore. And we also lose the microbiome when we eat it, that we create out of the different varieties and different types of vegetables that we have. So this affects us internally and externally. So I talk about in this blog, I talk about heirloom varieties a little bit, but we do have a dedicated blog coming up on specifically heirloom varieties. And just encouraging you to grow heirloom and open pollinated varieties. So heirloom varieties means those varieties that have been passed down, like known, they have a name. For instance, they have like Grandma Hubbard's squash or mortgage lifter, because that was a name that was just locally given to that plant variety or crop or that tomato in order to identify it as something that they had bred, and just was like a common name. And because of that, these heirloom varieties, we have different qualities that come out, different plant resistance, different robustness in growth, and different adaptations to the climate that they are growing in. So something that's developed, like let's say the heirloom varieties that have Indian names, like oh, I can't remember right now, but there's some squashes that have like the names of the tribes, right? And when you have that, wherever that tribe or sorry, that Native American people lived, if they're in Oklahoma, for instance, those, and your climate is similar to Oklahoma, um, that particular variety of squash will grow well there. Okay, so how does this go back into our lives? So just as a balanced garden thrives, so does a balanced life. This was written during the pandemic. I've rewritten it several times. I don't think this is the best. I mean, I will probably continue to rewrite this blog and update it, and just it's the first time I'm laying it out here again, and every year I try to revisit it. So things may not be as you'd see vestiges of the pandemic times as well as now post-pandemic. And during that time, we were on screens a lot, and our kids were on screens a lot, and so continue to be. But we try to balance ourselves by turning off these devices at set times, because we know our eyes did not evolve to be hyper tuned to screens. And in fact, like forest bathing or just the Verditas, I think Saint, uh, oh my gosh, Hildegard will talk about it, Veriditas or something of that sort, where it's like greenery is really very calming and spiritually nurturing. And it's Saint Hildegard of Bingen is who I'm thinking of, and her writings refer to this a lot, how that the green leaves and looking at that really helps. And I think if when I talk about diversity, it's also looking at the diversity of what you experience in your life. So if you're experiencing just a screen in front of the day, sitting down all the time, that is not a balanced life. So the garden is always analogous to life. And so this is one of the ways that I try to bring that in. We need nature just as much as our gardens do. We need nature just as much as our gardens. What does that mean? We need a diversity of things just as much as our gardens do. Studying, reading, and journaling in nature, taking walks without devices, all of this is diversifying our own experience in life. A diverse community is a strong community. So I have lots of anecdotes here of how we were bartering during the pandemic, and those relationships that we form when we grow abundantly and we give the excess to our neighbors and they give their excess to us, and it's just, or their jams or their special things, it just is very unifying and very heart filling. And also watching how different, I talked in the blog about my neighbor from Bangladesh and how she had grown squashes without which were native to her own land. And because somehow because they were heirloom varieties, they had a resistance naturally to squash borers. And even the way that she had grown them. Oh, where's the picture here? There is no picture here. Okay, I would need to add some pictures here. So the way that she had grown them was with these sticks, just like random sticks that she would gather from around the forest area around our HOA, subdivision. And the sticks would serve as the trellises, just like makeshift trellises. Make your own trellis without fancy woodwork or buying a trellis off of Amazon, just using what you have. And that for me is just a really good reminder every time I read this and reflect on it, that you can use whatever you have. And that's what, coming from a third world country, you can, when you don't have any options, you have to find the options, you have to create the options. And so that's where I feel like, come on, we need to keep this spirit up here in the States, where we have so many resources that we can get. And of course, it's not going to be the fanciest Instagrammable post where it's perfect everything and perfectly modeled and so on, but something to help diversify your garden. If there's a project that you've been waiting on, is better than not doing it at all. Not having a compost bin because you don't know how to, create a compost pallet, for instance, but just using what you have, which is their Sterilite Rubbermaid tubs, and creating ways. So anyways, get out of HOA. Now we're talking about HOA and diversity, and how HOAs tend to sort of make us not diversified and the same. So I'm talking here about diversity in your garden, diversity in your community, and let's go bring it back again to diversity in the world. And that is something that I love here also, is that we are looking at the same principles through different lenses. Matt Powers here has a great video about standards of living and getting along with other people, like setting clear boundaries, meeting people where they are, putting family first, work first on what matters now, always innovate and adapt, never don't take offense. I thought cool to um, it was cool to put that in as well, just to bring back what is permaculture about this, what makes a garden permaculture as opposed to just an organic garden. There are several things, but one of them is that it's based on ethics, and those three ethics are earth care, which all of you were trying to do with the diversity by making everything ecologically resilient, people care, which we just talked about, and then fair share, which is making these resources available to other people without uh, inhumanely treating people, or being uncharitable. And so I think that this is a very positive. I always think of permaculture as a positive force for good, and I think that that's should come out in our gardens and be reflected in our lives as we practice permaculture, not just in our gardens, but in our day to day. So, how do you bring all these concepts of yes, diversity is good, yes, polycultures are good, and crops that have different functions are good? How do we do this? So we talk, I mean, you can refer to other blogs that we've written on permaculture guilds where we try to intentionally prompt ourselves to diversify the way that we grow. But here are some easy things to do is like, first, why don't we add pollinators um, or fill in the gaps in layers? So if you have a leafy green that's growing, but nothing underneath, like its root system of a leafy green is usually more sprawled out, you can grow in tandem with it potatoes and root crops and garlic that fill out that bottom layer of the root zone. If you grow pollinators, flowers, they're beautiful, but they also have support functions that will help bring in the predators of your main pests and attract the beneficial pollinators. So many things are listed here in the blogs, right? I encourage you to read it for more details. I don't want to go on and on with my lists here, but I have something called dynamic accumulators. Also trying to see like, well, what this is a point brought up by the permaculturist Alan Campbell from Food Forest Abundance. And he was like, if you look at, he grows in Costa Rica, and he said, if you look at your market, what are the normal things that we buy, right? What are the normal things that we eat? Okay, so sad American diet, we eat mostly carbs and protein. Now we're trying to introduce vegetables, but of those vegetables, what do we mostly eat of? We usually eat annuals. What was what he was saying? Annual plants, which are our leafy greens, our seasonal root crops, our fruiting crops that are very much in the summer seasons. But how open are we to diversifying and eating things like weeds or perennials, such as nuts and seeds and things that have a different plant profile? Because the things that create perennials are probably more stable because they come back again every year. I thought that was fascinating just to hear Alan talk about that, the benefits of eating perennials over just annuals. Also points towards our diversifying our diets in ways that I thought it was pretty diverse, right? I eat a lot of veggies. But when I think about it, do I really eat a lot of dandelion? Do I have a mushroom, a whole diversity of mushrooms in my diet? Do I grow a lot of mushrooms? And so you can just go infinitely into that, down that rabbit hole, and enjoy that foray into exciting culinary adventures that you never thought of. So I end with some FAQs. Why is diversity important in gardening? I hope I have answered that. How can I increase biodiversity in my small garden? Use vertical gardening, intercropping, plant native flowers for pollinators. See above for more details. And what are some easy to grow heirloom varieties? So sometimes we're like, where do I start? Why should I start with heirlooms, right? We just talked about that. Purple Cherokee tomato across the board in America is sort of, I don't know, Pacific Northwest. I know there's somebody in our GRI community, one Wilma, I'm thinking of you, who's planting the purple Cherokees. I don't know where they came from, so I'd have to go research and see where the tribe originally. I'm not originally American, lived and where they would forage and where they would plant, and see if you know where in America they really thrive. I think the hotter climates, right, Cherokee. Um, Forellenschluss is an heirloom German tomato, so probably the colder climates, the wetter ones. I love this because it has little speckles like the fish, the forellen, like some sort of a fish. That's why it's named after. And I just think that the the leaf is interesting to look at. It has like speckles of purple in it. Tokyo Bacana is one of our favorite loose letting loose heading cabbages, which we also use for kimchi. Is not as stiff as a Napa cabbage, but a Napa type cabbage. And it's not loose heading, rather, it's Napa type. So it becomes like a big, um, sort of rectangular, you can say, cabbage. Alabama blue collards, because they're blue, they're more pest resistant. I've found that they do better in climates that have a cold season. And even though it is Alabama, that's so funny. They did very well with us, which is a little north of Alabama. So try it out. I think that would be a great collard to start with. And our favorite zucchini, tromboncino rampicante, which is so prolific. Blue Hubbard squash. I've never really tried that, but that was what came up among heirloom varieties. So see if you want to try some of these, and explore in the future our next heirloom vlog on the different varieties that we would recommend. So if you need any help deciding what to do next, you could, of course, um, if you're a beginner, get you up, sign up for the Plant Your Pantry Challenge. If you are ready to build the garden of your dreams with help, and we teach you how to do it without having to do a permaculture design certificate course, and just really applying it right now, day to day, from seed starting to designing to harvesting. That's our Grow It Yourself program. And then if you'd like a one-off training, we have a garden workshop. So occasionally we'll have garden workshops. We may not always have it this month, but we try to have it like once a quarter or once every 4 months. So take a look at these links below, and I will see you. Get on our mailing list if you aren't yet, because we're always trying to roll out permaculture education such as this.